Welcome to tonight's live stream. So we have a very interesting topic tonight that I think, guys, is probably one of the most underestimated questions or topics that becomes discussed when it comes to retirement planning. It's the consequential decisions that you make in the first few years of retirement that shape not only the structure of your retirement, but your account balances, the amount of taxes you pay, the amount of income you can generate. Everything across the entire retirement spectrum ultimately is shaped by the decisions that you make in the first few years of retirement. So we're going to throw that back and forth tonight, hopefully shed some light, provide some good information, and we want it to be a lively conversation. So if you have questions, comments, make sure to put them in the chat box here, because Eric, Ryan, and I, we do this every single day, so we didn't do a ton of preparing for tonight because this just comes naturally. So anything that you have that you want to add to the conversation or have a question and you'd like us to talk about, please throw it in there. And on that note, we're going to have two giveaways tonight. And in order to qualify for the first giveaway, you have to put some type of comment in the comment box here. Either tell us where you're from, but ideally some type of question, something that's on your mind, and then we'll discuss it. And I also do have to apologize up front. We do not have Lizzie or Nicole here tonight. You guys are stuck watching me, Eric, and Ryan. But I promise this is still going to be a good conversation. So put your comments in. The first giveaway is $100 to your favorite restaurant. And in order to qualify for that one, again, you do have to put some type of comment, even if it's just where you're from, in the chat box. And then we'll do a second one at the end of tonight's live stream. And in order to qualify for that, you'll download our 5 ways to generate retirement income guide. So Eric Nguyen, Ryan Kenney, how are you guys doing tonight?
Great.
Doing wonderful.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a mouthful. Like I just got a lot out there.
You did.
Yeah. I think
There's
I
a lot
did it
to talk about.
I think I did it all in one breath too. That's impressive. Yep. Okay, so I want to start with one of the questions that I don't think we receive enough unless somebody's actually going through it. So I don't know how many of you have retired versus soon to retire, but if you retire prior to 65, you have to make a decision. And that is, how do I get money to fund my retirement and hopefully also keep costs down when it comes to the healthcare? Because health insurance premiums could very easily be $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 a month for a married couple. So Eric, I want to start with you. When we look at this decision, because this is, again, the theme of tonight is decisions that you have to make in the beginning of retirement that shapes the next 25 to 30 years. So the first one I want to look at is people that have large retirement account balances, and they want to do Roth conversions. They want to buy Uncle Sam out. They want to buy that partner out of that retirement account, but they're 63, 62 maybe, and they're not on Medicare. Right. So what are some of the considerations when you're looking at, should we, and I guess I should even let you qualify the conversation. There is strategy when it comes to keeping your health insurance premiums down. So maybe you should start by explaining that. But the trade-offs, what are the things that someone needs to consider when they're making this decision? Do I try to keep my health insurance premiums low by qualifying for a subsidy through the Affordable Care Act, or do I tackle this tax infestation I have in my retirement account?
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, it starts with kind of the timing on when you're retiring, right? So the part that Troy's referring to is, hey, if you retire before 65, which is when you become eligible for Medicare, you have to facilitate your own health insurance unless it's provided to you by a pension or something like that. And then if that's the case, this part of the conversation doesn't really apply to you, right? And so the idea here is that, hey, when we're trying to figure out whether we can retire, one of the most overlooked expenses is around healthcare, right? Because so long it's kind of a hidden expense because you never really see it. It's out of sight, out of mind. It comes out of your paycheck every single month when it comes to health insurance premiums. Of course, yeah, it doesn't feel good when you go to the doctor and things like that. But hey, most of the time you're working with a company that covers a lot of these health insurance premiums, right? Well, when we're transitioning into retirement, we no longer have the benefit of a company or something like that to cover a good chunk of that. And so the idea here is that, hey, when you do retire, a lot of people end up going to the marketplace for health insurance. And when you do that, hey, there is a decision that you have to make, which is, hey, part of why the Affordable Care Act, regardless of your feelings on it, was put in place is so that when people were not making enough income or not enough income is produced, a lot of their premium ends up getting subsidized. And so the concept here is that, hey, are we in a position to control our income, taxable income, which would then help us qualify for these then subsidies, and therefore, hey, save ourselves, thousands and thousands of dollars in those few early years of retirement on health insurance premiums? Because the difference could be, like you said, paying $1,500 to $2,500 to paying no premiums.
Yeah, and this is where we talk about tax diversification, because when you're preparing for retirement, leading into it, in my opinion, tax diversification in regards to your accounts is equally as important as investment diversification. So if you retire with all of your money inside that 401k, you really don't have this ability, because you have to generate income. And when you say control your income, this is what you're referring to, is you have choices when it comes to retirement. Where do you withdraw money from? If you can withdraw it from the non-qualified accounts, none of that goes on your tax return, assuming you can either harvest gains, or you have harvest gains against losses, you have a savings account. Sure. Assuming you don't generate large cap gains, either short-term or long-term, you can pull from your non-IRA assets and potentially have zero income go on your tax return. Right. Well, if you have zero income go on your tax return, well, then you qualify for a full and complete subsidy for your health insurance premiums. But if you're in the situation where all of your assets are inside that retirement account, that's what you're saying, is you don't have that flexibility.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So Ryan, so Eric's kind of set the stage. This is what a lot of times we're trying to do from a planning side. When you look at it, and somebody has non-qualified dollars, so they can implement something like this, versus they have a large IRA and they really want to get the tax man out of that account, right, and do Roth conversions. What are some of the considerations? Because again, this is something consequential. Whatever you decide here, it shapes, for better or for worse, it shapes the rest of your retirement, because it requires resources to do the Roth conversion and spend income. So what are some of the things you're looking at, and what are some of the trade-offs that you would discuss with the client?
Well, income creates the need to not, or the inability to qualify for subsidies potentially. So your increased cost of healthcare, doing a Roth conversion in that particular year and for the short term is going to increase your tax base, therefore more taxes you're paying early. So that's two things right there, where we just said if we do Roth conversions and not qualify for a subsidy, where we're maybe spending a lot more than we initially planned in those first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of retirement, what's that doing to the compounding power of those accounts, right? When we combine those two. But then where's the trade-off, right? We're spending more early, but what does that look like 25 years from now with RMDs, where those are at, some of those things. And so offsetting those together ultimately is where that decision point is I think in another area, we'll talk about this, but pressure now or pressure later, right? And so what's the most important thing right now? Sometimes I think people will get stuck in this, I feel this way, and so I want to make the decision, and that's somewhat emotional. Let's look at the numbers, but ultimately there's no one perfect answer, right? It is about trade-offs. So in those early years, right, do we maybe spend a little less for our lifestyle so that we can accomplish these things because that's what we want to do ahead of Medicare? Or do we push off certain things and wait till we go on to Medicare, where that health cost should come down, and now we have a longer 8 or 10 year runway to be able to do those conversions? So just looking at those projections, what does that look like? Where are we going over time? We can get to a couple different places, but it just depends on what do we do?
Yeah, because you have to make the decision. So you're 62, you have to decide, do I try to qualify for the subsidy, or do I tackle the tax infestation in my retirement account? So if we tackle the subsidy, meaning we want to qualify for the subsidy, that means we're pulling money out of the non-IRA accounts. We're leaving more money in the IRA, so that is compounding, which everything is connected. So now, consequentially, when you hit RMD age, because you have more money inside of the retirement accounts, now your RMDs are most likely higher. We don't know what taxes are in the future, but if taxes are higher, now your taxes are higher. So this is the theme of tonight, and we're going to go through several situations where the decisions that you make today, they have consequences, and it's our job to help make those consequences visible. And when you have that information, all the trade-offs for each decision that you have to make available at your disposal, and you can see it, then you can make the decision based on what matters most to you. And that's what you have to do in this situation. I think most of the time, at least from my experience, you guys tell me if you experience something different. I think most of the time people say, let's qualify for the subsidy, right? Let's push these Roth conversions out until we're on Medicare, because at that point we have from age 65 until 75 to still do Roth conversions. So you still have a 10-year window there. Do you see that most of the time, or do you ever see it the opposite way where they want to tackle the Roth conversions?
A lot of the times it just depends on the kind of situation from client to client. A lot of the times when I see somebody kind of push that Piper down the road is when they feel very comfortable with things like their life expectancy, right? Because then they have a lot more time to make up the tax hits, the expense hits on the front end with the tax-free growth, right? Because that's what you're doing with Roth conversions, is you're trying to offset what you kind of hurt on the front end with the tax benefit on the back end, right? Now, when people, the folks that I have that kind of want to rush it more and are willing to sacrifice the subsidies a little bit more, is maybe when one spouse is maybe not in good health, or he has just a little bit worse family history when it comes to life expectancy. It's a real conversation that we just have to have with clients, right? And that's a lot of times what they're coming in and thinking about is not necessarily, hey, what helps me long-term is if we roses and flowers both live to the age of 95. It's, hey, there's a pressure of, hey, I'm not in the best of health right now, and I want to make sure this problem doesn't hit my wife, right? And so that's when that sacrifice happens more of, hey, forget about the subsidies. I want to rush this so that the RMDs in a single tax bracket aren't nearly as bad. Yeah,
and so I need to connect those dots there, because what you're talking about is making a decision from a planning perspective that may not be mathematically accurate, because focusing on the Roth conversions first means, one, you have to pay taxes on those conversions, so that's less money you have to grow and compound, but you also have to pay the health insurance, the higher health insurance premiums. So that's, again, less money that you have to grow and compound over many years. So you're talking about a situation where somebody says, you know what, Troy, I get that, but I'm not in the best health. And I know when I pass away, my spouse is going to go into the single brackets, and that problem could be much more significant than this one, because she'll go from married filing jointly to single. We're going to have these large RMDs. Her income's going to be $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 a year, and that's a big tax problem. So they choose to address that one first, even though mathematically it may not make the most sense today.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's all about finding those unique situations and understanding, hey, each person's unique. And that way, once you define what you're really trying to accomplish, and a lot of times what you're trying to accomplish is trying to prevent something.
Yeah.
Right.
What matters most to you.
Exactly.
Right. And that's the thing we talk about all the time, is anchoring back to what matters most to you. You can have 3, 4, 5 different, families come in, and they have things that matter most to them. It's different from one another, but they'll have the same decisions to make. When do I take Social Security? How much income? From which account do I withdraw? How do I invest? How much risk do I take? Do I buy long-term care? Do I not buy long-term care? Well, let's slow down. Let's anchor back to what's most important to you. Right. And then that is the guiding light a lot of times to the decisions that they ultimately make that makes the most sense for their family. So, okay, so we have your client, Michelle, here.
Hey, there you are.
So I bring that up because, Michelle, you won the giveaway last week, and I know they were super excited there. So I just want to say hello to a few people before we kind of move on to our second one here and see if we have any questions. So, Michelle Corniglio, hi, how you doing, Michelle? We have Mark from New Jersey. Coming through here, looks like JT from Cyprus. Okay, so Corinne, if there are any questions here, let me know, because I want to make sure that we address them here. The video isn't working for some. Did you guys get that figured out? Good to go? Okay. So, okay. So, that was a really good conversation. I hope at least the audio was working or the video was working there, guys. So, if not, we'll come back to it and recover that if it wasn't working. Just let me know, Eric, if it wasn't working. We can have the conversation again. But Okay, we're going to move on to the second thing. And again, we're going to do the giveaway in about 15 minutes from now. Okay, so this is one that I think Lizzie, so one of our advisors here, Lizzie, does a really eloquent job when it comes to framing the long-term care decision.
Yeah,
because this is the one decision that we cannot quantify. And I guess I should couch that a little bit. It's one of the more difficult decisions to be able to quantify because the costs are growing at a rate higher than the inflation rate in the normal economy. You may or may not need to use long-term care, and the length of time that you may or may not need long-term care is unknown. So there's a tremendous set of variables here that we have to make some educated guesses. So the question then becomes, from a planning perspective, is do you address it? How do you address it? And which resources and how many resources do I need to dedicate to potentially long-term care if it's important to me? And how does that impact my ability to spend, my ability to grow assets, my legacy goals, and everything else that we have that we're trying to accomplish? So what are the considerations when somebody is, let's say, 63, 65, 67, they're about to retire, and they're like, you know what, Troy, I took care of my parents for 3 years. Right. I saw them blow through a couple $100,000. They were, I don't want to, it was work for me, and I don't want to be a burden to my kids. What are some of the trade-offs that need to be understood about the options, the viable options that are available to address this unknown? What are some of those options, and what are the trade-offs?
Yeah. So really got three main options. You have the asset-based side, you have the what we call the expense-driven side, and you have more of the self-funding side, right? We said
so let's just break it down there. So what is asset-based?
So asset-based is going to be a product where you put the asset in and it can create a future benefit, but if we don't need it, it can be a death benefit for your heirs, your family.
And the asset is $50,000, $100,000, sometimes
whatever that dollar amount is, nominal to the need, what it can create for us in the future, what type of product, right? There's several different asset-based type policies we can explore, whether it's a life insurance type vehicle, annuity, other type of long-term care type vehicles. But the biggest thing is if it goes unused, if we think of like auto insurance, right? If it goes unused, we get that back. And with that, our family gets that back, or our heirs.
Hence, not an expense, it's an asset on the balance sheet.
That's correct. And then the expense-driven side is exactly like auto insurance, right? We pay these monthly or annual premiums, and ultimately it's for this hope of this benefit in the future to cover, X percentage of that need, where that's really where the unknown is. What is that need in the future? Do they raise their premiums? Do they not? Do we cut coverage back so we don't have to raise our premiums? Things like that. And then the third, the self-fund, pretty simple there. We set assets aside to grow at a particular, risk profile so that those are there, and that's kind of set aside from our normal lifestyle. And again, it works kind of like an asset base. If we don't need them for long-term care, then ultimately it's going to come back to the family, to the heirs. Typically not your favorite financial advisor, I'll say that. That's usually not where that goes. But so those are kind of the three main things. And so what do we want the most, right? Is it lifestyle? Is it legacy, right? Do we want to make sure we're protected? Certainty. Mm-hmm. And I think age and assets have a large role to play in that, right? And which one that we do use as well, and where are they structured? Are they in tax deferred accounts? Are they in non-qualified accounts? Are they in Roth? So those are some big considerations there in the trade-offs. We have to look at what do we want at the end of our lives, or when that time period would come up. So, where do we fit that? There's no perfect answer, but each situation's different.
Yeah,
right?
Because it is a consequential decision, but it's a consequential decision that you're making under the pressure of not knowing what the future brings, if you'll ever need it, right? What the future brings. So, okay, Eric, kind of walk through the trade-offs here. Let's say somebody, let's focus on the self-insuring. So you take money, you put it into an investment account, and you grow it, you set it to the side, and it's there if you ever need it. And the asset base, because they're kind of similar from a trade-off standpoint, although quite clearly potential outcomes definitely some trade-offs there. But let's start there. What are the trade-offs and considerations when it comes to the potential consequences of taking money out of your accounts today to set aside for either one of those two strategies for an unknown?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing you always kind of have to look at is, hey, what's the status quo? What if you don't address this problem, and just what does that look like, right? And you basically kind of have to define two things a lot of the time, right? Number one is what you were referring to is kind of undefinable, right? We have no idea what that need will truly be at any given time in our plan, right? Based off of what healthcare will cost, based on your level of need when it comes to long-term care, right? That's when a lot of people go back to family history and things like that, right? So I say you have to define that, but that's kind of a little bit undefinable, right? There are plenty of places where you can go to pull averages based on where you live and things like that, based on the type of care you may think that you need, right? The second thing you define is you go through your plan, right? And there's one thing that when we go through a plan that I talk through with my clients consistently, that's what you call your safety margin, right? Your safety margin is kind of the general buffer that you have through the life cycle of your plan, right? It usually just correlates to what is your investable asset base, or what are the dollars that you can go touch at a given time to be able to address that need, right? To your point is, Ryan, hey, what do we actually have available to address this problem if it does arise, right? And so you're battling between an undefinable and something that you can clearly define with good planning, and trying to marry those based off of how much do I want to risk that safety margin for this undefinable.
Yeah, no, it's a really good perspective, because first you got to have to identify how important is it to you.
Correct.
Right. So let's say now it's important to you. Okay. Second thing you're saying is, okay, well, what's the asset base that we're working with here? You know, if you have $4 or $5 million and you're spending $75,000 a year, $100,000 a year, you probably don't need to worry about, unless you completely want to transfer the risk to an insurance company, you'll probably have enough money to cover most 100%. Scenarios. But if legacy is your primary goal, it could make sense to look at some type of hybrid strategy to where you have enough assets. But you know what? If I'm going to spend $300,000 on care and I can buy it today for $50,000, that's not a bad deal, right? So maybe it's a hybrid approach to where you're self-insuring because you have the money, but also hey, you know what? Legacy is important to me. This secondary goal or tertiary goal. So I don't want to use my money for this later. I may use the insurance company's money. So it depends. What is your asset base? What's the priority for you? And that determines the urgency.
Right.
Now, let's say we look at somebody who maybe doesn't have as much money saved. Let's say they have $800,000, $1 million, somewhere in that range, and long-term care is very important to them. Right? They saw their parents, one spouse, one parent, a lot of expenses, dragged out situation. Another parent, let's say they spent the rest of the funds that they had on care, and it's very important, and they don't want to be a burden to their children. Now you're talking about a very difficult decision, because you have to decide, do I take assets today, set them to the side for something that may or may not happen? But if it does happen, I'm going to be really, really happy that I did this. That's a tough conversation.
Very.
So Ryan, and I'll let you both address this one, because this is good. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah. You're on a roll.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's what do you set aside and define as your out for something like that, right? Because again, one of the factors people don't think about is who does it happen to first, right? Because a lot of the times, hey, in typical long-term care world, a woman is more likely to go into long-term care simply because of longevity, right? Sorry, guys, we do stupid stuff in our lives and somehow we die sooner, right? But the idea there is, hey, once you kind of define that sequence, what is going to be set aside, right?
Well, that's another question. Who do you insure?
Exactly.
Because do you insure both? And thankfully there are strategies that you can have coverage for both for a similar cost. But yeah, I mean, it's just another layer to the onion, which makes this element of planning very, very difficult. And again, we're not trying to solve it here tonight. That's not the point. It's to raise some awareness, to get you thinking, and to just bring to the forefront, because I'm going to show you a graphic in just a minute, that you should understand that the decisions that you make today not only shape the structure of the rest of your retirement, they shape the viability of it, but they also don't show themselves, if you make bad decisions, as mistakes, oftentimes until many, many years later. So if we look at, two households, Eric, if you want to go ahead and pull up that graphic and let me know when it's up. So if you look at two households with the same trajectory, okay, so or making the same decisions, the same asset bases. So if you see this graphic that you have on screen right now, what you're seeing here is a probability of success model. So the squiggly lines, we call them noodles sometimes, and they're just different experiences, assuming different rates of return, different experiences, different outcomes. But it's the same set of assets, spending, age, life expectancy, all of those variables are the same. And the only thing I want you to notice with this graphic is during the first 10 years or so, there's not a huge difference between the red line and the green line. And the red line are those that are hypothetically failing, and the green line are those that are hypothetically succeeding, meaning you pass away with money. So during the first 10 years or so of retirement, you're making these decisions, and you could have a red line initially that turns into a green line. You could have a green line for 8 years, but ultimately it turns into a red line. And so we just don't know because they're so compacted in that first 10 years of retirement. And this is the entire purpose of tonight's live stream, is because we want you to understand how consequential these decisions are, what some of the big ones are, and just arm you with awareness, really, to make some better decisions. Okay, Eric, you can pull it down if you have not already. And okay, so I'm going to look through some of the comments here, see if we have any questions. We're going to do our first giveaway in just a minute here. But anything, Ryan, I know Eric, you threw it to Eric there because he was on a roll, but anything you wanted to add?
One of the things we didn't really talk about, we talked about the age later, right? At what age, the unknowns, our health, our longevity. But I think the other side of that we kind of missed on was what age are we when we're looking at this? Because especially on the expense-driven side, it can drive a lot of the potential coverage we can get. Even on the asset-based side, depending on what vehicle and product we use, some of that has age and health consequences to it as well for the ratings or what type of coverage we can get per dollar. So I think that's just a big thing to think about too, is are we 55, are we 60, are we 70? Sure. Where that age of when we're looking at this decision could really drive where we potentially fund it from, how we fund it, and that. So just thought that was a good thing to think about in that thought process as well.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, so I tell you what, so I'm going to answer a couple questions right here, and then we do have the winner of tonight's first giveaway, but I'm going to keep you hooked. You got to stay for a few more minutes here. Okay, so we have some really good comments here and some questions. So Scott from Pearland just said, what mechanism are you investing in for long-term care? We touched on it there. So the options available to you are expense-based policies that most of you are familiar with, asset-based policies. So you take $100,000, you set it here, it turns into $300, $400 if you need it. And if you don't ever need it, the money goes back to your family. It's not lost. And then self-insuring, a hybrid strategy maybe of both of those, maybe an expense-based and a self-funding, or a self-funding and an asset-based, typically is going to be a pretty decent approach, but it depends on everything Eric talked about and Ryan talked about there. But there are some innovative options available. Okay, so I got a couple good ones here. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the winner for tonight's giveaway, because I don't want to drag this on for about 10 minutes. So tonight's first giveaway winner is Susan Swanson. So Susan, congratulations. You have won a $100 gift card to your favorite restaurant, plus a golf clap from Ryan and Eric. Our marketing department will reach out to you to deliver that. So thank you very much. We have one more of these coming up. And in order to register for the second one, you can download the guide that I wrote, 5 ways, I believe it's 5 ways to generate retirement income. Regardless, it's a really good guide. And by downloading this, you should see a QR code on your screen. You will register for tonight's second giveaway, which again is a $100 gift certificate to your favorite restaurant gift card. Okay, so I want to move on to some of these other topics, but a couple good ones here. First, Lewis says, hard pill to swallow due to high premiums. My mother-in-law and father-in-law paid in for 25 years. Mother-in-law never used it. Father-in-law was in home for about 8 months. Insurance only paid 1 month. So that's an example of where asset-based makes a lot more sense than expense-based. The reason we started looking at asset-based strategies was a gentleman named Arthur, 13, 14 years ago, called in from the radio show. So many of you know, many of you may not. I've done a radio show for 16 years here in Houston. And about 13 years ago, Arthur calls in and he says, Troy, he says, you can't help me. He says, I know you can't help me, but I'm going to come in and see you anyways. So he comes in and he's got this tweed jacket on and he reaches into the pocket and he pulls out this statement and he slides it across the table to me. And he says, Troy, I want you to read that. I said, yes, sir. I read it and it says, dear sir, your premiums are going up 100%. And he said, this is the third year in a row I've received this. So they've doubled 3 years in a row. So at that point, $36,000 was the benefit, $3,000 a month. But he had to write a check for $30,000 to keep it in force. And it's not economically viable. If you live long enough with expense-based long-term care, your premiums are either going to go through the roof or you're never going to use it and you're going to lose all that money. So that put us down the road of looking at alternatives, and that's where asset-based comes in. The trade-off with asset-based, though, is it's a much larger capital allocation to money that it's not going to grow much. Some of them grow a little bit, but that's not their purpose. So there's trade-offs. So yes, I do get it. There are potential solutions out there. It's just not a clean answer. It's just not. It's just one of those things that's very difficult in retirement planning. And it kind of is what it is there, but I do understand. HELOC for long-term care, so a home equity loan. It depends what your goals are, right? But
if it's done plenty of times,
reverse mortgage.
Yeah. It's, if assuming that legacy isn't your primary goal and that asset isn't meant to just go to the children, absolutely, right? There's no reason not to consider something like that. It's one of the options absolutely available. It just depends, how long do you need care? What is the money available in a HELOC or a reverse mortgage? And then how does that weigh against your other priorities, right? Mm-hmm. Anything else to add there, guys?
The interest rates. Where are interest rates?
Yeah. Many people view folks that don't care about legacy. Many people view their home as their long-term care gambit.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be an appreciating asset. It's going to be there. If you need to sell it, you're probably not going to stay at home anyways. It's a very viable option for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. So EEF says, I designated part of my Roth IRA. If I don't need it, the kids can inherit the money. So, okay, again, I can't give you personal advice here, but one of the things that we talk about a lot of times with clients is if you're going to dedicate assets to long-term care, Roth assets probably are not the most ideal. And again, it could be a hybrid strategy where it's some Roth, maybe some traditional, some non-qual. But the reason I bring that up is because currently medical expenses that exceed 7.5% of your adjusted gross income are deductible. Now, I don't know what the tax code will be in 10, 15, 20, 25 years, but historically, we have always had some type of itemization that allows you to deduct medical expenses that exceed a certain portion of your adjusted gross income. So one of the ways that you can use your IRA, not Roth, in the future, potentially is medical expenses for assisted living, for long-term care. Currently, the IRS gives you a per diem, what is allowed to be deducted for medical expenses when it comes to long-term care. But also you'll have a breakdown from the facility of what is medical, what is, let's call it operational or administrative. And you can use IRA dollars to distribute. And if your expenses are large enough, potentially deduct them. So take tax-free distributions from your IRA. So that was a good one that I want to make sure that you're aware of, so at least you can look at your particular circumstances and kind of maneuver based on what makes sense to you. Hey, guys, anything you want to add there?
That's a great point.
Oh, that's a very good caveat.
Okay, so the last one I saw here, and I'm not going to answer all these guys. I get on a roll. I like to go. Are loans against financial assets looked at as income? I want to perform maintenance, buy toys, and travel without raising my income and triggering IRMA and other penalties. So ultimately, can he take a loan against his assets?
The non-qualified ones.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's what the billionaires do these days.
Yeah.
And so, but non-qualified, that's a big one, right?
Right.
So, and there may be some institutions, I don't know, is it illegal or not? I know we can't do it for IRA assets.
I've never heard of it being able to be done on your IRA assets, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. I've just not seen it.
Yeah. So banks want collateral. So the reason typically you do it on your non-qualified assets, or they will allow you to do it there, because your IRA assets, they have a haircut, depending on what tax rate, right? Now, there may be some law that disallows it, but your non-qualified assets, maybe it's a 50% loan to value, and you can take a loan against them, pay the interest. The one thing I will say is this is technically going to be a margin loan. That interest is tax deductible, but it's only tax deductible if you offset it against interest income. So you can't offset it against other items. But talk to a CPA about that. There are some benefits there. If you're a bond investor, I believe a real estate investor, and you have some interest income, you can offset the expense of that margin loan. You can offset it with that. You can offset it there. So,
Yeah.
Okay. So, all
That's a
right.
good question.
I didn't think we were going to spend this long on the first two topics, but I think they are rarely discussed as much as they are heavy on people's hearts. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised that it lasted a little bit longer there.
It makes sense. There's so many trade-offs, right? So many. And to know what that's going to do in the future, there's really never a perfect answer, right? There's just not.
And a lot of times the perfect answer is doing nothing.
Right.
I shouldn't say perfect answer, but the right answer for your family. It's literally, you need to generate income. You don't want to take risk. And if you dedicate a certain dollar amount to long-term care, you may run out of money. And then what if you never need long-term care?
Right.
So there's a lot of times there just isn't a good answer or a perfect answer or the right answer to every question that you ask in retirement. But you deserve to know the information, and then you make the decision.
Know the information, but also know, if we make these decisions, right? I mean, domino effect to other things that are coming up. We've discussed a few, and there's several more we will or can discuss. But ultimately, when we show that chart, right, which trajectory are we staying on, right? Which one are we pointing on? And we just don't want it going this way. We want it going this way, right, as much as we can. And each year you're going to be faced with these decisions. And unfortunately, sometimes 12, 15, 20 years from now, you look back, right? And that's what we're talking about tonight. These decisions now, what do those mean?
Consequential,
right?
Yeah.
But it's the considerations around this decision and the benefit around this one.
But one of the things, again, the value of an advisor, right? One of the things that goes unwritten not visible many times is if we start down one path, we very well may pivot, right? The story I shared with you about Arthur earlier, nobody ever pivoted, right? Nobody talked to him about it. Nobody brought it up. Nobody looked at it. Nobody explained the trade-offs, and he kept it until he was 87 years old, and the premiums went through the roof, and he couldn't afford to keep it. What strategy you embark on today, or combination of strategies, it may make the most sense given the information that's available right now, but in 5 years or 10 years, the most important thing you may do is pivot to something that is more strategic or sensible at that time.
Yeah. I've had plenty of clients just with the recent bull market pivot away from their own asset-based things that they've set up in the past because, hey, now there's enough in a pot that they can set aside and still accomplish all their expenses. And now they can get that money back to make it work for their plan because they have enough now.
Yeah.
Right? Happens all the time.
Okay, so Social Security. I want to transition to Social Security. So if you have Social Security questions, put them in the chat box here because this is, I don't care if you have $1 or 100 million, Social Security seems to be one of the most debated topics out there and something that across that entire spectrum is of interest to most people. So the question I like to pose is, where do you want the pressure to build? Because too often people look at Social Security and they do this math calculation, this break-even problem. And I personally don't believe it's a math equation, right? It's not a math problem. It's a lifestyle decision. Absolutely. Where do you want the pressure to build? So Ryan, what do I mean by that? And take it from there.
Yeah, no, it's such a great way to say it too, because do we want the pressure to build in the beginning of retirement or towards the end? And the pressure is really the tax and income planning side, right? So if we, for example, turn on Social Security at 62, turn it on early, right? We're going to have a better tax and income situation in the early, but then we have less income later, and those retirement accounts, again, have been left to defer. So our RMDs are higher, our withdrawals are higher, taxable income is higher, and our Social Security income, which is in all technicalities a tax advantaged income, is lower, right? And so the pressure builds on the back half of retirement instead of the front half. And then vice versa, if we push it out, say 67 or even 70, right? Some of that pressure is in the front half of retirement. Is we're pulling from those retirement accounts, for example, we're delaying that, but then later in life, we have this larger Social Security benefit that, again, tax advantage income, we're probably in some more favorable tax rates, lower RMDs, right? So the pressure's in the front half, lower in the back half.
Yeah, it's almost like maybe a seesaw isn't the right image or visual, but it's the way I kind of look at it, because, right, you have to decide where do you want the pressure to kind of build. Right. Eric?
When it comes to Social Security, and I think the general theme tonight also is we need to stop making decisions in a vacuum if we want to get the right answer for your situation, right? And perfect. Social Security, to your point, when we're just calculating break evens and things like that, that's looking at it in the lens of a vacuum, right? And so I tell my clients all the time, when it comes to Social Security, there's 3 levels of decision making. And I don't give them any particular order because it's up to them to decide which one matters the most, right? But the first one is the simple break-even conversation, right? If you live long enough, you will have, and you decide to delay your Social Security benefit, you'll make far more money long-term than if you got the smaller amount to start with, right? That kind of refers to your pressure side, right? The secondary one is, in most situations throughout people's lives, not everyone was equal earners when it came to Social Security, right? And so a lot of people make Social Security decisions based off of, again, similar to what we were talking about earlier when it came to Roth conversions and things like that, is what happens to a surviving spouse, right? Or the second remainder inside of the plan there, right? Because if you maximize a benefit, that's what remains when one person ultimately does pass away, right? And then that third layer too, right, is what you're talking about, Ryan, is, hey, if we need to do things like Roth conversions, spend down IRAs, and do a lot of income planning, do we delay Social Security to leave room in the tax brackets to maneuver all of those things, right? And so, again, it just depends on which priority matters the most to you. And that's kind of, if you don't leave it in its own vacuum where we can have this conversation separately and bring it back into all of those other things, you make a much better informed decision.
Because retirement we don't want you to optimize the math, but miss the life.
Yep.
Right? So,
absolutely.
So one of the biggest psychological problems that we encounter when it comes to clients retiring, it's that first year, that first 2 years. I don't feel comfortable, Troy, spending money. Well, we have this income plan, we have this tax plan, we have everything laid out here. You have, $2.5 million. You're in a good spot here. But I don't feel comfortable. And the reason I found people don't typically feel comfortable, it's because what the paycheck did, it was predictable, it was durable, it was liquid, and it was growing. It had 4 qualities that no one tool in retirement can replicate. You have to use a combination of imperfect tools. It's gone. So that predictable, durable, liquid, growing stream of income, it's not there. So now you have to take savings and you have to turn that into using a combination of tools with uncertainty regarding the market, how long the money will last, everything else, into some type of stream. You have to replicate what the paycheck did. Social Security does that. And that's why so often people turn it on. But when you turn it on immediately, you simply transition that pressure or transfer that pressure from the beginning years now to the out years, right? Because you have a much smaller Social Security check, medical expenses inflating at a rate greater than normal goods and services in the economy. right? But it just requires you to withdraw more money from the portfolio in your out years than you would otherwise in the beginning years. So you've just transferred the pressure. But a lot of times what we see is people are unwilling to spend that money early in retirement because either they can't replicate the qualities of the paycheck, or they're trying to optimize the math, right? And they're missing the life. And that's what we don't want to see. We don't want to see you, well, Troy, my spreadsheet says this, and that is now causing my behavior to be this way. And I'm missing these great years that I have to get out, to spend money, to enjoy it, to do what I want to do. That's the number one thing about retirement is the numbers are one thing, but man, enjoy the money, enjoy what you have, enjoy the life, enjoy the kids, the grandkids.
What you built over 40
Yeah,
years.
you earned it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so often our job is helping to get you to that point. Right. And some people it's easy, right? Some people it happens immediately, and some people it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. 5 is maybe a bit much, but I've definitely seen 3 and 4.
Yeah. It's a psychological shift. I mean, so many things. Accumulation is all about building wealth, right? Nobody necessarily wants the market to go down, but you kind of at times want the market to go down when you're throwing in
the accumulation phase.
Right. In the
20,
accumulation.
30, 40.
Right. Now and what you're talking about with Social Security, kind of the paycheck replacement, so to speak, when that's just your portfolio because you're 60 or you're 64 and deferring Social Security, that puts a lot of pressure on there, right? And so we can make maybe a little more emotional decision with Social Security where, look, sometimes it makes sense to turn it on early. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that is
Very
what
much
makes
so.
sense.
Mathematically, for most people, I think it makes sense to turn it on early.
Yeah.
If you're just looking at the math.
Correct.
But the lifestyle factors, right? You may have a spouse that you want to make sure has a higher guaranteed lifetime income because she's expected to outlive you.
Right.
So I guess ultimately the point I was getting at is we want to make decisions based on your ability to enjoy retirement. And a lot of times it's not the right math answer, right? Very much so. It's not the right math answer.
Take it out of the vacuum, and when you do that, it's not all numbers.
I want to talk about, and we have to do our second giveaway here in just a minute. Time's flying tonight.
Yeah,
no, actually, no, it's not. We started 30 minutes later than normal, right? So we're good. Okay. My computer is about to die. Corinne, I think when you looked at this, I think it maybe came unplugged. I want to talk about the utility of deferral, Social Security, because I think a mistake that often gets made is we have 2 spouses and we want to defer both of them. Both of their Social Security checks. But the lower earning spouse, what happens if you spend all these years deferring and then he or she is the one that passes away first? You don't, there's no benefit, right?
None.
Because you only keep one check, which is the higher one.
Right.
So oftentimes from a planning perspective, it may make sense to turn on the lower earning spouse at 62 or 65 or 67. There's a haircut there if you, a permanent reduction in spousal benefits if you take it before full retirement age, but it may very well make sense to turn that lower earning spouse's benefit on sooner.
Well, and if the lower earning spouse, it isn't half of the higher earning spouse's full retirement age, right? And
Until they're at
they
full
turn it on.
retirement age, yeah.
They're not getting a spousal benefit until the larger spouse is turned on, and so if that spouse passes away before they even turn on their benefit, there was no spousal benefit to take.
Yeah.
In that case, right? And so it's
and there's been instances where we've been able to. Ed had one recently, retroactively go back and apply. There's been instances where thousands and thousands of dollars that are being left on the table can be created.
Absolutely.
From missing these, what may seem to us as pretty clear and obvious situations, but they're not until you learn them.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's over 7% you're getting each year by delaying. So then what are we doing with our assets outside of that? If we're delaying for that, or if we're turning on early, how do we overcome that too? There's
Anecdotally,
so many ways to look at it.
I very rarely have clients turn on Social Security at the same time. It always ends up being some sort of combination because of age difference, earnings history, spousal benefits, those kinds of things. So it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Scott, self-funding is the same as investing your own assets for future growth. I'm just picking up in the middle of these comments here. I want to make sure I address that one. Okay. Okay, so let's transition to. We have two topics here that I want to get into. I don't know which one I want to go first. So one is how you invest matters. We see a lot of times people invested either too aggressively because we've had a long bull market, or too conservatively because they're just conservative and they don't want to see the accounts go down. It matters in the sense of even a half a point, averaging 5.5 versus 5 over a 25 and 30 year period makes a significant difference. So in that regard, the asset allocation really, really matters. But I feel like that's kind of worn down a bit. The other one was that we have is to Roth or not, right, because we did Roth versus subsidy.
Sure.
But I think let's go this route: the to Roth or to not Roth.
To Roth or not to Roth,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What is that, Macbeth?
Yeah. I've turned this into a Shakespearean.
Yep.
So yeah, we talked about it earlier. So outside of the subsidy component, when you retire prior to full to Medicare, and you're deciding, do I want to convert, tackle this IRA tax infestation, or keep my health insurance premiums low? What do I do? Let's say we're past that. That's not a consideration, or it's not an option. One of the things I think you'll find is a lot of people only look at, and this isn't necessarily the wrong way to look at it, but we think it's kind of incomplete, is if I do conversions, my account balance is here when I die, versus if I don't do it, my account balances are here. So a lot of times when you do Roth conversions, you will have less money in totality over time. Other times it's projected you will not. But I think a lot of times when we're looking at planning scenarios, the total amount of money at death is one of the last items of consideration when it comes to do we Roth or do we not.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, for the vast majority of people, I fully agree with that. I mean, absolutely.
Well, what do I mean? I guess let me ask you a question. Explain what I mean when I say that.
Well, I have a client where legacy is 100% their goal, right? And so that may mean a little bit different to them, but that's not a large percentage of people, right? It's their lifestyle, what they've built, and then legacy is important, but we want to make sure we fund them, and I think it's just too different.
But even legacy, right? So let's say you die with $2 million in Roth or $2.2 million in IRA. Which one are you rather
$2
inheriting?
million in Roth,
right?
100%.
So even for legacy, right?
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But RMDs, Eric, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing when it comes to that conversation is it kind of goes back to, and sorry to kind of backtrack everything, right? But you're basically making, once you pull your paycheck, right? Forget that's all done with, you're basically making 2.5. There's only 2.5 places your money can really go after that, right? It's either going to go towards your lifestyle or your legacy. The half part's the IRS, which is partially what we're talking about right now, right? And so when it comes to kind of that conversation is just broad terms, right? The same way that you just mentioned Social Security is a break-even calculation, so is the Roth conversion calculation, right? And so when I talk about lifestyle versus legacy in that standpoint, when you do those Roth conversions, you're either going to see that break even happen in your life, which means it benefits your lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. Or your spouse's lifestyle. Or you look at, to kind of the question you just posed, is the break even going to happen for your legacy purposes, right? Where $2 million of Roth when you pass away, I would argue is even more valuable than $3 million of traditional IRA that you would then pass away with, right? To your kids, legacy, those kinds of things. And so that's really what you're determining. Yes, RMDs are going to be part, and we can talk about that in a second, but to Roth or to not to Roth, it's a break-even calculation, and it's which one do you care about? Where do you want to see that? Is it in your lifestyle or is it on your legacy side?
But this is why it's so important to get clear in the beginning in regards to what's most important to you.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't have that as your guiding light, what's most important to you, all of the consequential decisions that you'll have to make in the future, if you don't have that to anchor back to, a lot of times you can go adrift. Yeah. Right? We can start to get lost in the noise of our daily lives, our daily thoughts, our, what we saw on television, what we heard on the radio, what we read in, whatever magazine. And those things can kind of shift you in a certain direction that, what, this sounds really good. How many times have you guys heard someone come in and, Troy, or Eric, my friend is doing this, it sounds really cool. I want to do this. Let's put this in place. Sure. Or let's buy this. SpaceX, let's, that's an easy one that immediately kind of comes to mind. Right. But I remember fancy trusts and things that were borderline, questionable, let's say, people would bring to me and say, Troy, can we do this? I've heard this. My friend's attorney is doing this. And it all sounds good, but if you don't focus on what matters most to you, and then use that as your guiding light whenever you're making decisions, because these decisions are consequential. They reverberate throughout your retirement. They impact your account balances, the ability to generate income, the amount of taxes you pay. They impact everything. You have to make these decisions with what matters most to you in center focus. And that's where it becomes paramount to get crystal clear on what matters most to you. Because if removing tax risk is important to you, if making sure that if you die first, that your spouse isn't left in a bad tax situation or, just a situation that's kind of mired in muck, that, multiple different accounts, multiple different institutions, dealing with the IRS, dealing with required distributions, dealing with multiple advisors, dealing with all these different things. If that's what's important to you, then that's what we tackle, right? That's what retirement planning is. It's identifying that and then creating a plan to build out from there.
And this conversation too, just to kind of give everyone a breath of fresh air again, because you're talking about before how, hey, when we've been presenting these choices, right? They're two very polarizing choices that we're presenting, right? To Roth or to not to Roth, right? Subsidies or IRMA. Just like any decision that you make in life, there's a compromise, and that's where the beauty happens, right? Because realistically, you were talking about, hey, is it just a math problem? If you're living on the extremes, it is a math problem, right? Because then that's your priority, right? You can go absolutely insane and go nuclear. I always tell my clients it's the nuclear option to whatever end goal that you have. But really the whole goal of planning is to find the middle ground that meets us in the middle of all of life, right? Because there's very rarely a singular focus that's going to be driving us, right? It's just not realistic to look at it that way. That's the beauty of planning is you got to find the middle ground between all of that.
Susan, I want to bring your question up here, your comment really, because it's something I just think needs to be addressed. She says she sometimes, and I'm jumping in, I'm just reading the comment here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but my interpretation after a quick read was, you've recently retired, I believe, and there's some guilt that comes with spending money because you spent a lifetime of saving money, right? That is, it's very succinct the way you put that. And it's so true, right? And it's something that should be recognized, and it's something that should be, discussed. There is an element of guilt, and then so here we're here in Houston, and Brene Brown's here in Houston. I don't think we'll be able to get her to come on, but she does an amazing discussion about the difference between shame and guilt, and just the emotional aspects of the psychological, I guess I should say. Around those types of feelings. And, there's nothing wrong with how you feel, and how you feel is how you feel, but it's how you frame it, right? It's how you look at that decision and then how you move forward. And ultimately, in retirement, there is some guilt. It's common. It's normal with all of a sudden spending money when for 45 or 50 years, you've been socking it away. You've been saving it. How do you guys have conversations? Eric, I'll start with you. How do you have a conversation with a client that is going through that? If they don't tell you directly that, there's some underlying guilt there, you can usually pick up on that, pretty soon if they're a client. How do you have that conversation?
And kind of just to continue what I was talking about, it's the same thing, right? Is what is the purpose, right? What's it all for at the end of the day? Is it for your lifestyle? Then why are you not spending that? There's no reason not to, right? It's just going to sit there and do nothing. And all of a sudden, hey, you could have done much more while you were working with that money, right? And if that was the case, then why did you bother saving that amount, right? So in all actuality, I frame it the other way, right? I would feel guilty not spending the money that I worked so hard to earn for this end goal of my lifestyle or retirement, right? Versus, hey, some people do look at it as more of a legacy standpoint, so they do need to be more controlled and more thoughtful and more, I'm going to call it just intentional about how they spend money because they have that specific goal, because maybe they received an inheritance that helped them step up in life, and they want to do the same thing for their next generation of their family, right? And so, again, it's just, what do you want out of this all at the end of the day?
Yeah, and a lot of it is, so I did a video with a Dr. Lindsay Wolf on the YouTube channel probably 5-6 years ago, and I believe Jessica also did one with Dr. Wolf. And she's a psychologist. She works with sports individuals who play sports and a few other areas. Eric, I don't quite remember, but good discussion we had. It's still on the YouTube channel. It's Dr. Lindsay Wolf. Jessica, her interview is probably a little bit better than mine, but I would recommend you go look at both of them. And we talk about the emotions around money, right? And Jessica, if you're not part of her Go-Go Sisterhood, this is a group of women that get together, just starting it back up. And, I'm not going to make the pitch here, but Jessica does a lot of that work with women around the feelings around money and goals. And, again, I'm not going to do it justice myself here, but, the psychology of money, and a lot of times how we feel about money today, if you can trace it back, if you can think back to your very first interaction with money, it's called your money story. Oftentimes, your very first experience with money shapes, even today, how you feel about money. So some of that guilt maybe that some of us experience whenever we retire, transitioning from a life of saving and accumulating to now we have to distribute, any emotions that we have around that, we very well may be able to tie back to our very first experience with money. So try that exercise. To learn more about it, just go to the YouTube video that Jessica did or I did with Dr. Lindsay Wolf on our YouTube channel. And it's a really cool exercise. I didn't realize how interrelated they were, but they are. Your very first experience that you can remember with money. Think about it. What emotions derive from that experience and how those emotions apply to your interaction with money today, but throughout your life. So, okay, so we have our second giveaway winner tonight, and that is Paul Hahnemann. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So, Paul, congratulations. You are the winner of our second giveaway. And in order to win that, he downloaded our 5 ways to generate retirement income. If you did not download that, I promise you it is worth the read. It's a really good piece. I personally wrote it, and I think anyone should download it. So if you haven't, please download that. But Paul, congratulations. Our marketing team will reach out to you. We are going to deliver that $100 gift card to your favorite restaurant. Okay, guys, we are at 7:30 here. I think we still have some comments. We'll keep going for maybe 10 or 15 more minutes. While I look through the comments, anything that we've to add on to what I've said?
Yeah, based on our last conversation, I just add, between clients and my father retiring along with my stepmom, my mom, walking through this last 4 or 5 years, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that money is a very individual thing. Our thoughts of money is a very individual thing. And so when we shape around the feelings of how we spend money, how we frame that, especially in the first couple of years of retirement, it's giving ourselves the grace to understand that we're making one of the biggest psychological shifts we'll ever make in our lives, accumulation to distribution. You said it great. We spent 30, 40, 50 years accumulating this money with this mentality of save, 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 don't spend, spend, spend. And now all of a sudden, from one day to the next, you're in no longer save but spend mode. it's okay to take a year, 2 years, 3 years to make that adjustment and try to figure out ways to get comfortable. But one of the best things you can do to get comfortable with it is to have a plan. Knowing that, look, a plan doesn't say, here's what we're doing 15 years from now. A plan says, here's what we're doing this year. Here's what we're looking at the next few years. And we're going to revisit it next year. And making sure that we're comfortable. What we've talked about, like so many different decisions, trade-offs that we can make in retirement, but having a plan, that's what ultimately is going to make you comfortable and stop feeling maybe so much guilt. Maybe you never don't lose all that guilt, but and that's okay, right? It's such an individual thing, and everybody does it in their own time and everybody does it in their own way. But the most important thing is having a plan. I think it's so important.
And it's that word plan, right? Because you're 100% right. A plan. The worst thing an advisor can ever do for you is give you like this 100-page document and this is the next 30 years. It's a plan. I hate the word because it connotates this is what we're going to do over a period of time. When in reality, what retirement is, it's an organization or organizing of all the things that matter.
Right.
And then putting them in order with priorities, and then having a framework that when we have to make tough decisions, that we have a structure of how we make those decisions.
Right.
But it's not, this is the next 30 years.
Never.
It's this what's important now. Here's the priority of how we're going to address them based on what's important to you. And when we have to make these big decisions, this is the framework we're going to operate in to make those decisions so we make good decisions. Yeah. And we give ourselves the best opportunity to make good decisions. Mm-hmm. And that's what retirement success is to me, is compounding good decisions year after year after year after year. And if, Ronnie in our marketing department here today asked me to do a reaction video where you see what somebody does and you react to it, and they're going to put it on Instagram or something. And it was a guy walking around asking people, how much do you need to retire? Well, it's that's not the right question. It's not how much do you need to retire. It's how much do you want to spend, for how long do you need to spend that money, and at what level of certainty does it need to be provided? So, it's not about a plan. It's about organizing what's most important to you, creating some priorities, and then having a framework to make some decisions. Okay, so EEF asked the question, and Corinne, let me know if I am incorrect here, but basically he or she says, what's the best way to decide on what to give in retirement? Okay, charitable giving. Love it. We do a lot of charitable planning for clients. Ryan, you want to kind of start the conversation, then we'll toss it over to Eric?
Yeah. Age is definitely always a big driver of where we're at because of different rules and where our account structures are. But ultimately facilitating, charitable giving can happen at so many levels for so many different reasons. And whether we're 70 and a half, or we're using a QCD from our IRA,
which is,
should explain that. Yes. Qualified charitable distribution, where we can take money directly out of our IRA, give it directly to a qualified charity. And it's treated as essentially a non-taxable deduction or a non-taxable distribution, straight to the charity. And so you're taking your pre-tax dollars and giving it to the charity straight through. But you have people that tithe. So then there's big questions around that too, is, tithe off of a certain percentage of our income. And a lot of times our income goes down, at least in the early part of retirement. Where do we move that? Where do we structure that from if we're under the age? The tax implications on, are we standard deduction? Do we itemize? So, but then there's charitable planning far and above that, right? When we start talking about giving to, people who give good money to their universities, for example, or their church or whatever it might be, and we're talking much larger dollars. How do we structure that? What accounts do those come from? Because if we're focused on legacy of our charitable intentions, but also legacy of our family, right? There's specific assets you would much rather, in your death, leave to the family versus to the charity,
yeah.
Right? And for example, We'd rather give the IRA dollars to the charity because no one pays the taxes at that point, and give all the other assets to the kids, for example. But it's important because it's a part of, just like anything else we've been talking about, it is a part of your lifestyle. It's what you want. It's your desires, right? And so it's not just how do we do it, but how do we most efficiently do it for you and your retirement?
And Eric, and a lot of times it just takes being somewhat charitable to be able to take advantage of some of the tax planning opportunities, meaning you want to give money to charity, but you maybe don't want to do it today. You want to do it when you're gone. Sure. So if you're selling a business, if you have highly appreciated assets, so if you've owned stock for a very long time with a massive capital gain, I think it's quite misunderstood some of the available ways to take advantage of ultimately giving them some money to charity, sure, but tax advantages during your life. So a charitable remainder trust. If someone has a business that they're going to sell, or they have highly appreciated stock, and they still want to generate income from that asset, but they don't want to pay taxes on the disposition of it, how does the charitable remainder trust fit into that type of planning?
So the nice part about it is, hey, you get to defer the immediate tax hit from whatever you're dealing with, right? Whether it's a highly appreciated capital gain, hey, you don't have to realize it right then and there. You can break it up based on usage over your life, right? It's the whole idea behind a charitable remainder trust, is that at least a portion of it does eventually have to end up with the charity, but throughout your life, you can calculate based on different calculation methods, hey, how much do I get to live off of a year for that particular asset, right? And so it's this idea that, and just let's just not confuse what charity is at the end of the day, right? Charity is giving money away. So no matter what, charity does not, and this is a common misconception when people come to us for these fringe ideas that they heard from another estate planning attorney that their friend did from another estate planning attorney, right? More money is always going to be more money, right? So when people talk about, oh, well, if I work longer, that's more taxes that I'm going to have to pay because it's more taxable income. We have the best progressive tax code in the world. More money is always going to be more money. And in charitable situations, less money is always going to be less money because we're giving it away, right? For our own personal plan at the end of the day. But if your natural inclination is to give because you're used to tithing a certain percentage, you're used to, and you want money to go to a certain place, you don't want to leave your kids with millions and millions of dollars because you want them to continue to work and you'd rather see it do good somewhere else, there are ways to take advantage of that while you're still alive. Charitable remainder trust so that you can take advantage of it. Donor advised funds so that you can break up that giving over time but get the deduction right away. There's so many methods that if you are inclined to do that can benefit your own personal tax plan to also facilitate a bettering of your own personal lifestyle at the same time.
You can do it with your personal residence, with a QPERT. You can do it the opposite of a charitable remainder trust. You can do a charitable lead trust where you give money to charity today. And then the remainder goes to the beneficiaries. Right. So there's a lot of different considerations there, but I think ultimately it comes down to, at least from our perspective, let's take care of your retirement first, make sure that you have the income and everything else that you need. And then once we have, some pretty good parameters in place there, as far as the structure and what we're trying to accomplish and how things are laid out, okay, then we start to look at, family goals, legacy goals, charity goals, and then just structure that out from there. It's just like when you peel the layers away from an onion, this is kind of like building the onion, right? We're building layer, but you have to have the foundation in place first, and then you can build some of those ancillary layers on top. So really good question. Okay. Corinne, is there anything else here? I just X'd out accidentally of the questions. So, okay, guys. I know I didn't get a chance to get to everyone's question tonight. But I really do appreciate everyone tuning in. I think we covered a lot of ground. We really did a lot of good discussion tonight. We do this again next month. I'm not quite sure if we have the investment team here or more financial planning, but if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please go ahead. That'll update you. And if you have any questions and if there's anything we can help you with personally, just reach out to us. Otherwise, we appreciate you tuning in. We thank you very much. It means a lot to us, and we look forward to seeing you next month.